Everything impromptu must just be sketched out first, and I dare say Miss Bracely worked a great deal at her dance last night, and I wish I'd seen more of it. She was a little awkward in the management of her draperies, I thought, but I dare say she does not know much about dancing. Still, it was very graceful and effective for an amateur, and she carried it off very well." "Oh, but she's not quite an amateur," said Georgie. "She has played in Salome." Lucia pursed her lips. "Indeed, I'm sorry she played in that," she said. "With her undoubtedly great gifts, I should have thought she might have found a worthier object. Naturally, I have not heard it. I should be very much ashamed to have been there. But about our tableau now. Peppino thought we might open with the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. It is a dreadful thing that I have lost my pearls. He would be the executioner, and you the priest. Then I should like to have the awakening of Brunhilde." "That would be lovely," said Georgie. "Have you asked Miss Olga if she will?" "Georgino mio, you don't quite understand," said Lucia. "This party is to be for Miss Bracely. I was her guest last night, in spite of the gramophone, and indeed I hope she will find nothing in my house that jars on her as much as her gramophone jarred on me. I had a dreadful nightmare last night, didn't I, Peppino, in consequence? About the Brunhilde tableau. I thought Peppino would be Siegfried, and perhaps you could learn just 15 or 20 bars of the music, and play it while the curtain was up. You can play the same over again if it's encored. Then how about King Cophetua and the beggar maid? I should be with my back to the audience, and you should not turn round at all. It would be quite your tableau. We will just sketch them out, as I said, and have a grouping or two to make sure we don't get in each other's way. And I will see that there are some dresses of some kind which we can just throw on. The tableau with a little music, serious music, would be quite sufficient to keep everybody interested." By this time Georgie had got a tolerable inkling of the import of all this. It was not at present to be war, it was to be magnificent rivalry, a throwing down perhaps of a gauntlet which none would venture to pick up. To confirm this view, Lucia went on with gathering animation. "I do not propose to have games, romps shall I call them," she said, "for as far as I know Riseholme, and perhaps I know it a little better than dear Miss Bracely, Riseholme does not care for that sort of thing. It is not quite in our line. We may be right or wrong. I'm not sure, I do not know, but as a matter of fact, we don't care for that sort of thing. Dear Miss Bracely did her very best last night, and I'm sure she was prompted only by the most hospitable motives. But how should she know? The supper, too. Peppino counted 19 empty champagne bottles." 18, carissima," said Peppino. "I think you told me 19, caro, but it makes very little difference. 18 champagne bottles standing on the sideboard, and no end to the caviare sandwiches which were left over. It was all too much, though there were not nearly enough chairs, and indeed I never got one at all except just at supper." Lucia leaned forward over the table with her hands clasped. "There was display about it, Georgino, and you know how I hate display," she said. "Shakespeare was content with the most modest scenery for his masterpieces, and it would be a great mistake if we allowed ourselves to be carried away by mere wasteful opulence. In all the years I've lived here, and contributed in my humble way to the life of the place, I have heard no complaints about my suppers or teas, nor about the quality of entertainment which I offer my guests when they are as good as to say sì to le mie invitazioni. Art is not advanced by romping, and we are able to enjoy ourselves without 200 caviare sandwiches being left over. And such wasteful cutting of the ham! I had to slice the chunk she gave me over and over again before I could eat it." Georgie felt he could not quite let this pass. "Well, I had an excellent supper," he said, "and I enjoyed it very much. Besides, I saw Peppino tucking in like anything. Ask him what he thought of it." Lucia gave her silvery laugh. "Georgino, you're a boy," she said artfully, "and tuck in, as you so vulgarly call it, without thinking. I'm saying nothing against the supper, but I'm sure that Peppino and Colonel Boucher would have felt better this morning if they had been wiser last night. But that's not the real point. I want to show Miss Bracely, and I'm sure she will be grateful for it, the sort of entertainment that has contented us at Riseholme for so long. I will frame it on her lines. I will ask all and sundry to drop in with just a few hours' notice, as she did. Everything shall be good, and there shall be about it all something that I seemed to miss last night. There was a little bit, how shall I say it, a little bit of the footlights about it all, and the footlights didn't seem to me to have been extinguished at church time this morning. The singing of that very fine aria was theatrical. I can't call it less than theatrical." She fixed Georgie with her black beady eye, and smoothed her undulated hair. "Theatrical," she said again. "Now let us have our coffee in the music-room. Shall Lucia play a little bit of Beethoven to take out any nasty taste of gramophone?" "Me no likey gramophone at all, never." Georgie now began to feel himself able to sympathise with that surfeited swain who thought how happy he could be with either were t'other dear charmer away. Certainly he had been very happy with Lucia all these years, before t'other dear charmer alighted in Riseholme, and now he felt that should Lucia decide, as she had often so nearly decided, to spend the winter on the Riviera, Riseholme would still be a very pleasant place of residence. He never was quite sure how seriously she had contemplated a winter on the Riviera, for the mere mention of it had always been enough to make him protest that Riseholme could not possibly exist without her. But today, as he sat and heard rather than listened to a series of slow movements, with a brief and hazardous attempt at the scherzo of the moonlight, he felt that if any talk of the Riviera came up, he would not be quite so insistent as to the impossibility of Riseholme continuing to exist without her. He could, for instance, have existed perfectly well this Sunday afternoon if Lucia had been even at Timbuktu or the Antipodes, for as he went away last night Olga had thrown a casual intimation to him that she would be at home if he had nothing better to do and cared to drop in. Certainly he had nothing better to do, but he had something worse to do. Peppino was sitting in the window seat with eyes closed, because he listened to music better so, and with head that nodded occasionally, presumably for the same reason. But the cessation of the slow movement naturally made him cease to listen, and he stirred and gave the sigh with which Riseholme always acknowledged the end of a slow movement. Georgie sighed too, and Lucia sighed. They all sighed, and then Lucia began again. So Peppino closed his eyes again, and Georgie continued his mental analysis of the situation. At present, so he concluded, Lucia did not mean war. She meant, as by some great armed demonstration, to exhibit the Riseholme spirit in its full panoply, and then crush into dazzled submission any potential rivalry. She meant also to exert an educational influence, for she allowed that Olga had great gifts, and she meant to train and refine those gifts so that they might, when exercised under benign but autocratic supervision, conduce to the strength and splendour of Riseholme. Naturally she must be loyally and ably assisted, and Georgie realized that the tableau of King Cophetua, his tableau as she had said, partook of the nature of a bribe, and, if that word was insidious, of a raising of his pay. It was equally certain that this prolonged recital of slow movements was intended to produce in his mind a vivid consciousness of the contrast between the romp last night and the present tranquil hour, and it did not fail in this respect. Lucia shut the piano lid, and almost before they had given their sighs, spoke. "I think I will have a little dinner party first," she said. "I will ask Lady Ambermere, that will make us 4, with you, Georgie, and Miss Bracely and Mr. Shuttleworth will make 6. The rest I shall ask to come in at 9, for I know Lady Ambermere does not like late hours. And now, shall we talk over our tableau?" So even Lucia's mind had not been wholly absorbed in Beethoven, though Georgie, as usual, told her she had never played so divinely. End of chapter.